Sam Altman was just interviewed by Axios in Davos, and he gave some major updates about GPT-5 and answered some tough questions about a range of different topics. We're going to watch the video and I'm going to break it down. Take a look.
Look, when we decided to launch ChatGPT, we thought it was going to do well, but we had no idea how well it was going to do. And we thought the models we knew they were going to be great eventually, but we didn't think they were good enough to resonate like ChatGPT and GPT-4 have. And so I think one piece of knowledge is that this technology, even with all of its current limitations, is far more useful than we thought and can integrate into our lives in a much more valuable way than we thought. And so now that we know that, as we think about launching the next much better models, we come with a different perspective. I learned something about important and urgent problems and not letting the important but not urgent ones fester. I learned something about board members. I learned a lot of things.
Okay, so even Sam Altman was surprised by how incredibly popular ChatGPT became and how quickly it became that popular. And not only that, how useful it is in people's everyday lives. I've seen entire businesses be transformed by ChatGPT and AI in general already. I use AI in a bunch of different areas in my life already, including obviously for work. I'm extremely bullish, and this is probably the least interesting question from this entire interview. Let's go to the next clip.
What can we expect AI to do this year that it couldn't do last year?
There are all these things that we can happen, and I'd love to talk about sort of all the specifics, but the general principle, I think the thing that matters most is just that it gets smarter. So GPT-2 couldn't do very much. GPT-3 could do more. GPT-4 could do a lot more. GPT-5 will be able to do a lot more. And the thing that, or whatever we call it, and the thing that matters most is not that it can have this new modality or it can solve this new problem. It is the generalized intelligence keeps increasing. And we find new ways to put that into a product. We find new ways to use it. But that is the higher order bit. I think that dominates everything else in the importance, is that the overall capability of the model, its overall intelligence, its ability to do longer, more complex problems, more accurately, more of them, that is increasing across the board. And that to me is one of the few things that make this totally different from any previous kind of technology.
Okay, so in this clip, he was asked what we can expect from AI in 2024. And he didn't really say too much here, other than it's going to get much smarter across the board. But I think we all understood and knew that. I think one little tidbit that slipped out is he might not call it GPT-5, he said, or whatever we call it. So that's very minor, but I just wanted to point that out. Let's watch the next clip.
And let's talk kind of this year, what we can expect. Do you think most of the gains will come from new, more powerful models, or the fact that we now have so many more people developing on the models for this year?
That's a great question. Obviously it'll be the multiplicative factor of both, but if history is a guide for us, it is the more advanced model that is the most important step forward. So I think I would expect that to be the biggest gain again. But as it does get integrated into people's workflows in all these new and different ways, the productization is critical. Like we started off as a research company. Now we understand that we have to treat both research and product as both critical. And it's the fact that we can do both of those things that I think makes us a special company.
I thought this was a fantastic question. And Sam Altman said, not only are the gains going to come from improvements in models, but they're also going to come from this huge influx of new developers building on top of AI and all of these new AI tools that allow developers to build incredible products. And I could not agree more with that. Now, he did ultimately say that he believes gains in model performance are going to be the biggest gains overall, but I'm not so sure. We're not going to have AGI this year, at least that's what I think. And so a lot of the gains are going to be based on these incredible projects that are being built on top of artificial intelligence. And I cover a lot of those on my channel. So if you're interested in those, definitely subscribe if you're not already. And the coolest part is getting this new technology into all the developers' hands to allow them to build these incredible projects. But of course, he has insider information. So he might know something that is coming, GPT-5, in 2024 that might be this tremendous gain in AI that nobody was expecting. And he'll touch a little bit more on that later in this video.
What are some of the limitations that you think this will be the year we overcome these? Not just you, Sam Altman, and OpenAI, but kind of the industry. What are some of the things that are on the cusp of being solved, whether it's hallucinations because of better grounding, whether it's merging AI with company data or specific data sets.
So that's a good one. I think access to specific data and the ability to use specific data in a much better way for like more relevant, more like context-aware work. I think that'll get much better this year. I think there's all sorts of the current stuff that people complain about, like the voice is too slow and it's not real time, and that'll get better this year. I expect.
Okay, so this clip continues, but I'm going to wait a second, and I want to talk about what he said already. Now, he is talking about being able to have large language models be much better at retrieving information at inference time. And that is super important, something that ChatGPT only recently has gotten pretty good at. With Elon Musk, X, and Grok, that is what it was built to do, get real-time information from the incredible amount of data that X generates every single day. And they can get it in real time, and that's incredibly important. Real-time information cannot be built into the base model because at training time, that's essentially when that knowledge is cut off. But with retrieval augmented generation and just regular web scraping, the ability to give large language models real-time information is incredibly powerful, and we're pretty much there. But he goes on to talk about something I truly believe in. Now, you already know I've said that programming is going to be extremely different in the coming years, and in 10 years, we probably won't need programmers at all. Now, he starts to hint at why that might be. He doesn't say it directly, but he talks about a shift in the way that people use computers that probably would lead to that outcome. Let's watch.
I think where we're headed, and then I'll talk about this year, is we're headed towards the way you use the computers to talk to it. The operating system of a computer, in some sense, is close to this idea that you're like working inside of a chat experience or an AI experience. And you get to your computer, and rather than go open a browser and type in Gmail and look through your emails or whatever, you might just say like, what were my most important emails today? Can you respond to all of those? I'll see these. Go find this thing there and send it there. So we're heading towards this new way to kind of do knowledge work. I think with every great technological revolution, we do get an opportunity to use a computer in a new way. And we won't get all the way there this year, but I do think we'll see people do more and more of their workflow inside of a language model, for lack of a better.
I was going to say.
Okay, so you remember the Rabbit device that was just announced a week or so ago. I pre-ordered one. I can't wait to get it. And of course, I'm going to make videos about it. But that is truly what I believe is the future of how humans will operate computers. It is as simple as natural language direct to compute. And that's what he's talking about. He is talking about no more graphical user interfaces where you have to click, type, everything. You just talk to AI and it tells you exactly what you're looking for. And that is so fascinating. And in that environment, that's when I start to think, where do programmers live? If I just talk to a large language model who can write and execute code to achieve the task that I just gave it, why do we need programmers? And this brings me no joy to say because I love programming, but it's hard for me to see a future without that. And I made a whole video about it. I'll link it in the description below. And if you disagree, please tell me in the comments. And of course, if you disagree, let me know as well.
Do you think people will be spending hours a day within some sort of AI assistant?
Well, some classes of jobs already do, like programmers. Many programmers already do that. And I think that's a reasonable advanced look at what may happen to more people. So yes, I don't know exactly what the format it'll be. I don't know if it'll I don't know quite what this new computer of the future looks like or this new like AI operating system looks like. But by the end of the year, I would certainly say it's a safe bet that more people are doing their work in one of these experiences. And it's not just this thing you launch a few times a day when you have a question or need your buzzword speech written.
Yeah, I could not agree more. As these models get better, as more developers build incredible projects on top of them, they're going to get so capable that our operating systems are going to start to transition to this natural language interface as the default. It's going to be very early this year, but I do believe in the next few years, the way we use computers is going to change fundamentally.
And what won't we see this year? What are some of the things that AI will do down the road, but beyond sort of the robots taking over science fiction stuff? What are some of the things that absolutely will come that we'll want, but are more than a year away?
The single thing that I think is most important to me about what AI will do for us is help vastly accelerate the rate of scientific discovery, make new scientific discoveries increasingly autonomously. I don't think that's a this year thing, but I think when that happens, it's a huge deal.
All right, so in that previous clip, Sam Altman talks about the rate of scientific discovery. Now, there's been a number of papers and articles lately talking about large language models' ability to discover new research, mathematics, science, and a lot of them say, at least today, it can't be done. However, as these models continue to get better, and with the addition of synthetic data, allowing orders of magnitude more data to go into the models to be trained, a lot of people do believe that large language models are going to make scientific discoveries. And Sam Altman is obviously one of those people. Now, how incredible would it be if large language models running 24 hours a day were tasked with finding a cure for cancer or other diseases, other ailments, other genetic defects? The consequences could be absolutely incredible. And this is just one of the reasons why I'm so optimistic about our future, especially as it relates to artificial intelligence. But now Edith Fried from Axios is going to start asking some hard questions. Let's watch.
What you've done to date of training on the open web is fine. Why do you even need to sign these kinds of deals to license content?
What we're interested in is not data for training, which we could talk about later. There's some value to that, but what we really want is when people are using ChatGPT and ask what happened today at Davos, we'd like to be able to display trusted, branded, high-quality content at inference time. And that's been the focus of these deals, not training.
All right, I'm going to pause for a second. This part of the conversation continues, but this is really important. He is setting up the argument that the data that he is getting from the New York Times and other sources, but really the New York Times because they're the ones that sued him, is not really that important for what they're doing going forward. The real importance of having these up-to-date articles and other things that may be copyrighted is the fact that you can get real-time information from reputable sources. And now Ina goes on to press Sam further about this topic. Let's look.
Okay, but when it comes to training, I mean, do you still believe that it's reasonable to train on anything that's publicly available?
I wish I had like a easy yes or no answer for you on that. I think it depends. There's many cases where we think it is. There's many where we don't think it's the right thing to do, legal or not. Like, for example, we respect opt-outs in the spirit of being a good neighbor, even when it's clearly totally legal for us to do it. And I think that's like a good thing to do. Now, one of the tricks to all this, by the way, is let's say you are the New York Times or somebody else. We can respect an opt-out to not go like look at, train on your content. But New York Times content has been copied and inappropriately or not attributed all over the web. And so when we're reading the web, there will be New York Times articles not identified as such on random articles that say please, on random sites that say please train on my data. So to be able to like ensure that we don't, that we're sort of like a good neighbor, one of the things that we think is important to happen is no matter what we train on, and we'll try to respect it as much as we can, but the internet is a weird place. No matter what we train on, we don't want to regurgitate someone's copyrighted content. That feels clearly not good to us.
Okay, I want to pause it there for a second. So obviously this is all about the New York Times and the New York Times suing OpenAI. Now what he's saying is they allow opt-out from specific websites, and that's fine. But he's also saying that all over the internet, public data, people have already copied and not attributed New York Times articles everywhere. And it is really difficult to filter for those unattributed pieces of content because they have proliferated all over the internet already. And this is all stuff that OpenAI has already published as their counter argument to the New York Times lawsuit. And of course, they don't want to regurgitate an article word for word because that is copyright infringement, and also it doesn't really add that much value. So I do believe that Sam Altman is trying to do the right thing, although his assessment on whether he should be able to train on copyrighted material legally, I think is wrong.
So we're working to drive that as close to zero as we can, and we have made huge amounts of progress with new technology there.
And that has to do with what gets surfaced in terms of how you train models. And the courts are going to settle a bunch of these. I mean, you guys are facing lawsuits, others are. Are you prepared to, if you have to, build a model that's trained only on stuff that's clearly public domain or licensed?
Yeah, again, I think everyone is convinced like my data is so great. we cannot imagine you can make an AI without the New York Times training data. Now, we're happy to include New York Times training data if the New York Times would like, and there are many other partners who want us to, but we don't need to. And in fact, as these models get smarter and better at reasoning, we need less training data. If you just think about your own experience, like probably no one in this room has read 2,000 biology textbooks. The 2001st, if you had, it's not going to help you that much.
All right. That is a spicy answer. He basically said, if you're a content owner and you think we need you, we don't. You need us. What an answer. And he says, as models continue to get better at reasoning and logic, they won't need as much data to train on. Now, I'm not so sure about that. He definitely knows better than I do, but I think at the same time, synthetic data is going to be a huge boon for OpenAI and artificial intelligence in general. And of course, that isn't copywritten at all. Let's keep watching.
What you want is a small amount of super high quality data and to think really hard. So huge amounts of data are going to continue to be important to us. There's lots of good ways we can get that from clearly like open domain data. And then increasingly, I think the models are going to think harder about a smaller amount of known high-quality data. And if people don't want us to train on their data, no problem.
Okay, he definitely contradicted himself there. He, on the one hand, at the beginning of that clip said, yeah, we're going to continue to get more and more data. And then a second later, he said, well, our models are going to need less and less data. So that's definitely a contradiction. And I'm going to guess it's actually the former. They're going to need more and more data, but the data that they get won't be copywritten data because it'll be synthetic data created by the models themselves.
Do you have a model in the labs that's trained only on stuff that you know you have a right to?
I appreciate for sure the effort to get me to talk about a model in the labs, but we never do that.
Okay, love that answer. Sam Altman is media trained, to say the least. Ina tried to get Sam Altman to talk about a model that they are cooking up in their lab, and of course Sam Altman gave the hard, not a chance you're getting me to talk about that.
We'll move on to another easy topic, democracy. OpenAI announced a variety of efforts just in this past week about securing democracy, working with other groups to help secure democracy, your own efforts. With so many elections around the world this year, including, of course, the US presidential election, how confident are you that OpenAI's technology won't be used by either campaigns or outside actors to influence the election?
All right, before I show you Sam Altman's reply to this, the article that Ina is referencing is a blog post that OpenAI just put out, and it's about how they're handling election security. Let me show you that real quick. So this is the blog post. It was put out just a couple days ago. Democratic inputs to AI grant program, lessons learned, and implementation plans. It says, we funded 10 teams from around the world to design ideas and tools to collectively govern AI. Immediately, I think, wait, isn't that OpenAI's job? Why are they outsourcing that? That seems like an incredibly important thing to manage internally, yet they're outsourcing it to other teams. That's weird to me. Now, they do give a lot of information in this blog post about how they're going to be handling election security and democratic security in general. If you want to see me make a full video about this blog post, let me know in the comments below.
It's one of our top worries for the year. So we put this stuff out. We want to get way ahead of it. We know this is going to be important. I think in any election, people are tempted to fight the last war and put their effort into what happened last time and, try to mitigate that. My expectation, although it may be wrong, is that this time around there's going to be new challenges, and we've got to really be prepared in addressing those, and we don't yet know what all of them are. We have some ideas, as you mentioned. We published a lot of stuff yesterday, but we really just want to have a very tight feedback loop, careful monitoring, be willing to make changes quickly if we notice anything, and work with the broad ecosystem of partners to do the best that we can. But I'm nervous about this, and I think it's good that we're nervous about this.
So for a long time, Sam Altman has said that election security and using artificial intelligence to influence politics, to create deepfakes, these are all things that he's been worried about. He did an interview with Lex Fridman where he said the same thing that was over a year ago, and I'm sure he's been thinking about this problem for a long time. He hasn't really shared much other than we're going to try really hard, which, that's, I guess, enough for now, but I'm definitely going to dive deeper into that article that I just showed you to learn more about what they're thinking. Ina goes on to press Sam. Let's see what Sam says.
Still, I mean, there's only a handful of people whose job at OpenAI is really dedicated to election stuff. Meta, TikTok, they have hundreds of people. They probably have more people than you have in your whole company.
I don't know the number, but we have a lot. Like, we are taking this quite seriously.
But you only have 500 employees. You can't
like
have
800.
that many.
I don't know, 700. We have. I don't know the exact number, but more than 500.
But you can't have hundreds of people just on elections, right?
Look, there are a lot of companies that have teams of hundreds of people that do less than teams of like 4 people do at a competently run company.
All right, I love that answer. And the number of people working on a problem is not the right metric by any means, especially when you're talking about artificial intelligence, because AI gives people superhuman power, superhuman productivity. And the best researchers working their butts off on a really hard problem, a few of them could probably do more than a larger company. And I think a perfect example of that is looking at OpenAI. Look how much they've been able to do with just a few hundred employees, whereas Google has tens of thousands of employees, and their AI models are nowhere near GPT-4 level. So I think that was a very, very accurate answer by Sam Altman, and he is the right person to give that answer because not only is he doing incredible things at OpenAI with a very few amount of people, he also invests in startups throughout the world with a handful of people that go on to disrupt entire industries. So I absolutely love that answer.
You also announced a change in policy that allows OpenAI models to be used by militaries. Why did you make that change?
Because what we tried to do is say, here's what you can't use the models for, rather than here's this group of people that can't use it. There were parts of the Department of Defense that had, I think, super legitimate, super good use cases for our models, and a blanket saying, anyone whose address ends in .mil can't use this, I think is bad. I'm like a very proud citizen of the US. I'm a huge supporter of liberal democracy continuing to do well. We don't want our models being used to like make kill decisions, of course. But there's a lot of other stuff that the military does that's quite important.
Okay, so I like that answer a lot as well. He's basically saying the military should be able to use AI. There's going to be lines in the sand of what they can and can't use AI for, but just saying a military cannot use AI because they are the military is the wrong way to think about it. And he goes on to double down with support for the US government, the US military, which I also appreciate being from the US.
You've got some great use cases that you talked about, helping prevent suicide by veterans. Obviously, if someone giving a speech at West Point wants to translate it into Swedish, that's probably not a high-risk use. Then you have stuff at the other end, developing a nuclear weapon, clearly against your policies. But there's so much in the middle. There's so much that is not building a bomb. It's not destroying property, which is another one you have that's not allowed, but that could be really harmful. I mean, these AI engines are incredibly, capable persuasion engines. How do you draw the line of what a military can and can't do? And do you think that's the right place?
One of the things that we believe very deeply is that society and this technology have to co-evolve. We believe in iterative deployment a lot for the obvious reason, which is that people need time to gradually update and think and figure out what the rules should be. But there's another part, which is you can't separate the technology from the world. You can't just, even if you get everything magically right, you can't build it in secret and then put it in the world all at once.
So I agree that getting things out early and often is generally good. It gives people enough time to adapt, to test these things, and to make sure that there are no glaring holes or weaknesses or ways to abuse systems. But AI is a little different, and he has said this for a while, that he wants to get his AI out early and often. Now, one of the big issues with that is if he gets it out, there ends up being a huge problem, whether it's the ability to abuse the large language model or any other issue, or deep fakes or election interference. These can be irreversibly damaging events. So I get a little nervous when he talks about trying to get things out so quickly and wanting to iterate. And looking back at Meta's internal motto for many years, it was move fast and break things. But even Meta decided to kind of remove that quietly, because at a certain scale and when your product has such a big impact, breaking things is actually extremely negatively impactful.
because the world is going to keep changing with each iteration, which means on those middle cases, I don't know what the right answer is yet, nor does anyone, because no one has really like thought through and seen how the institutions and the world and society shift and reshape in response to this.
So again, he is saying he doesn't know. He doesn't know these middle cases. It's going to be obvious on both sides of the spectrum, but in the middle where it's not as clear, he's saying we'll figure it out along the way. Not my favorite answer, but I also don't know a better answer. How else are we going to test these new technologies other than getting them out into the world and seeing what happens? But of course, there's the flip side to that, which I already discussed.
There will be a lot of things that we'll have to start slowly on and iterate as we go. And there will be a lot of middle cases. But we do want to support the US government and other governments too. And like, I find it odd that everyone thinks this is a big gotcha question where they're like going to say, wait, are you saying you support the US government? And my answer is just yes.
Now, this next part of the interview, I find extremely fascinating. Let's take a look.
Do you think we'll be able to have one GPT, add your number to it, that really satisfies that? Or when you look at a country like one of the countries in the Middle East, are they going to be comfortable with the kind of system you've built?
Okay, so just to clarify what Ina is asking, they're saying basically the same way that Google's no longer operating in China, Meta's no longer operating in China because China has censorship laws and the US has different censorship laws, and different governments, different countries, different people throughout the world have different morals, have different values, and should a large language model change depending on which country it's being operated from? So let's see what Sam has to say.
I think there will have to be some global standards. And one thing I'm excited about is the technology itself, I think, can help us do that. You can imagine GPT and talking to all of its users to really understand their value, preferences, relative trade-offs, the nuance of that, and then doing something that actually represents all of the people that want to use this model. There will be a question of defaults. There will be a question of what the wide bounds of permissions possibilities are. Like what can you get a system to say? What can it never say? How much room do you have to customize it for yourself? And we'll see this at many levels. So there will be versions by countries, different cultures, individual people. And I think the answer there is going to be to allow quite a lot of individual customization. And that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable.
Yeah, so he's basically saying we're going to put GPT out, and depending on where you are, who you are, what values you hold, what morals you have, we might change it specifically for you. And in fact, the large language model will probably just learn what you think and reflect that back to you. Now, in my mind, that has the likely unintended consequence of increasing the echo chamber that is the internet. So reinforcing the beliefs that you already have. Now, Meta has been dealing with this, and other social media companies have been dealing with this since the beginning of social media. I don't love his answer because we should have diversity of thought, diversity of opinion. And if a large language model is essentially reflecting back what you already believe, that is going to have the opposite effect.
And does that mean OpenAI is comfortable to go into, I don't want to pick on an individual country because my hope is that they all expand their human rights, but there's a lot of countries that don't, for example, respect LGBTQ rights. If country X said, in order to operate in our country, you have to change the way OpenAI's models answer questions about that, is that something you're willing to do?
I mean, if like, again, in this idea of like a broad, what the absolute constraints are, if the country said, all gay people should be killed on sight, then no. We would say this is like, I hope anything that the world, the people of the world would come to as a principle would say that is well out of bounds. But there are probably other things that I don't personally agree with that a different culture might about gay people that, the model should still be able to say. And I think like it is not we have to be somewhat uncomfortable as a tool builder here with some of the uses of our tools and again, there are things where I think we can just say we draw a line here, absolutely.
So I'm going to guess, and I don't know this for sure, but my guess is that Sam Altman has very similar ideas to Elon Musk about free speech, in that there are a set of laws we have to live by and companies have to obey. And anything beyond that is considered free speech. And so we're going to be uncomfortable because we don't agree with something another country has to say or how they're using our GPT, but as long as it's legal, it's fine. That's my guess as to what Sam Altman is actually saying here. And this part of the conversation continues here.
But if I'm hearing right, you do foresee a world in which OpenAI's models might answer a question differently in different countries based on their values.
I would say more than that, it'll be for different users with different values, which, the country's issue, I think, is somewhat less important, but also
But a lot of
could be the
countries
case.
aren't comfortable with the users choosing what they get to. And it's not just the US.
Is the
and
question
China.
here like, will we respect other governments?
Will you, it's come before. I mean, Google decided not to do business in China.
Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. So Sam Altman basically said GPTs are going to be customized down to the user, which I actually like that idea. But then Enid goes on to press him and say, yeah, but within a lot of countries, that's probably not even going to be allowed. So it is going to be at the government level.
Yeah, and there are
much.
countries where we decide not to do business, but there are.
Okay, and he gives a very clear answer. There are going to be countries where we just cannot find a way to align with their morals and values enough to offer them our services.
A lot of governments who I think have different beliefs than us, where we can still say there's enough common ground here. We're heading towards a lot of the same values. Let's work together.
Okay, now they're getting into what Ian is calling the lightning round, and it's just going to be rapid fire questions, but we only get 2 or 3. The first one is spicy, so let's watch.
When you returned, you said you were hopeful that you would find a good role for Ilya and that things would continue. Have you found that role?
No update yet.
So is he working at OpenAI?
I don't know what the exact status of that is. I love Ilya. I think Ilya is like an unbelievable person and researcher. It's, obviously it's a sort of a traumatic event to go through, but I'm very hopeful. I care about him a great deal.
Okay, so if you're not aware of what's going on, when Sam Altman was very briefly fired from OpenAI, the person who was a big leader in that firing was Ilya. And they've been close friends. Ilya is a co-founder of OpenAI, an incredible researcher, an incredible mind in the world of AI. And then when Sam Altman came back to OpenAI, Ilya was obviously in a very awkward position. And here, Sam Altman obviously didn't give any new information, unfortunately. And next, we have another spicy question. Let's watch.
Whether or not it was one of the factors that led the board to do what it did, one of the criticisms of you, and there were a few criticisms of you during that time, was that, there's all this stuff that OpenAI is doing. Why are you off, raising money for startups, building other things? Why aren't you spending 100% of your time on these big issues that are confronting OpenAI?
So one of the reasons the board gave for firing Sam Altman was because they believed he was doing things outside of OpenAI that might conflict with OpenAI. He is a prolific startup investor. He has also been raising money for AI chip manufacturing. He's also been working with Johnny Ive reportedly to create an AI device, which I believe is outside of OpenAI. So let's hear what he has to say about this.
Are you continuing to raise money for things that aren't OpenAI and invest?
They are OpenAI. I think there was this misrepresentation, not hard to guess by who, but that I was off in the Middle East raising money for this chip effort, and that it was somehow like a SAM project. It was like an OpenAI project that the board had decided was a clear strategic priority.
Okay, so right there he clarified. One of the biggest stories to leak during his time of getting fired was that he was out in the Middle East raising money for building chips. And he is saying, no, that was explicitly for OpenAI.
It's not a separate thing. So, I'm not going to go try to fight everything in the press because you all will do your thing and I respect that. But that was wildly misreported. These are critical to OpenAI efforts. I don't invest much in personal startups anymore. I don't invest personally much in startups. I do support the ones that I invested in previous to this.
Things like with the AI pin and Humane.
Yeah. So that one's now gotten, I wouldn't do another round there because that's gotten way too close to OpenAI. But in general, if there's a startup that I supported and they're raising more money, I try to continue to support. But I don't think of myself as an investor anymore. I have some ongoing obligations, but this is what I'm doing.
So those are the major questions and answers from this interview. He goes on to talk a little bit about what C-suite executives might need to think about when considering how to use ChatGPT. And he basically says, use it internally. Don't try to build things on top of it as much as use it internally and really build productivity and efficiency within your company. And then the last question was, what are we not talking about? And Sam Altman says, well, infrastructure investments are absolutely critical, and we're not even close to what we need in the infrastructure game. So if you're an owner of NVIDIA, I would be extremely happy right now. This is not investment advice, but boy, that company will continue to absolutely dominate the AI chip market for the foreseeable future. The one exception is Apple, and I believe Apple is extremely well positioned to run AI directly on their M1, M2, M3 chips. They've already proven to be amazing at running AI on these chips. If you liked this video, please consider giving a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.